CNBC and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers.
The global capability centers in India have evolved and their role has matured over the years from being a medium for cost reduction. Their responsibility has now expanded to human relations, tax operations, trade and much more. Hello and welcome to the second episode of CNBC TV 18 and Thomson Reuters presents the future of global capability centers. Now in the previous discussion, we did a deep dive on the potential GCCs hold to help companies accelerate their transformation journeys. Today, I'm being joined by an expert panel who will decode the holistic approach GCCs have towards technology and how it can be further leveraged to standardize processes in organizations. Let me welcome on the show our panelists, Vishal Parekh of Thomson Reuters, Gaurav Gupta, Deloitte India, Arvind Subramanian from Philips, and Rajesh Ojha, Accenture India. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome from CNBC TV 18. Now, my first question to you, Gaurav. Of course, over the last 2 years, we have seen the huge transformation that GCCs have seen and evolved and also become much more pronounced in their strategic aspects rather than just cost savings. So there is a huge amount of evolution that has really taken place. In your view, what are the business value drivers from these GCCs and especially in the finance functions?
So I think, like you said, the drivers have changed since the time GCC started to come in from the early 80s in India, where it was largely labor or cost arbitrage. To today, when we see there are 3 or 4 key reasons, right? One is, I think just talent, sheer talent when it comes to quality, whether that's in the areas of, let's say, finance, and today if you see a lot of, functional knowledge has become techno-functional as well, right? There's a fair amount of technology in pretty much everything that we do across the organization. So bringing together not only just the pure functional skill sets, but, along with that technology skill sets. The second is obviously, in terms of being able to get everything together and then trying to see, especially for global organizations who've got, multi-country operations, distributed setups, etc., getting one place where you can have a complete view of the entire world and then start to see, what are we doing in what places and how do you actually optimize that, make it more efficient, and how do you extract more value out of that. So I think that's the second. And then the third one is, and as markets and regulators or the regulatory environment is becoming more and more complex, what we are also seeing, especially from a risk and compliance perspective, there is a big focus from organizations, and especially in areas like finance, tax, etc., to try and see how you can bring it together and make sure or reduce the risk that would exist in a very distributed setup. So I think talent and value that comes along with that talent, including technical and functional talent. The second is obviously, in terms of delivering more value. And then the third one, I would say, from a regulatory and compliance perspective, are some of the key drivers that we're seeing, especially around finance and tax and, associated technologies.
Right, Gaurav, a very good setting of the agenda for this discussion, and these are the value drivers. But Vishal, coming to you, a huge transformation has already taken place, but I'm sure the aspirations don't end there. From Thomson Reuters' perspective, you have been partnering with so many GCCs. What is your insight on the next level of aspiration in terms of the value curve here?
Sure, Nisha. So the journey from cost to value is not a new concept, right? I mean, as Gaurav also said, this is something which we've been seeing over the last several years. But I think with the advent of technology, things which were not common in the past are possible with much less effort, right? So I'll give you an example of in taxation, right? Tax was always, and in fact still is, considered hard to automate and nearly impossible to centralize. And hence you look at, reports from 5-7 years ago, only 5% of the GCCs had a tax center of excellence. Now, it's not a question of cost or value. It was really more of a question of whether this can even be done. And, in the past, I've met with CFOs who actually attempted to kind of centralize these very complex functions 7 years ago with a very complex, multi-step process with lots of people And today, some of them are leveraging our solutions to kind of really scale back and do the same job with like 80% less resources, 80% more efficiency, leveraging technology, right? Today we have language capabilities, which, someone sitting in Bangalore can actually do French filings and Spanish filings and so on, which was never possible in the past. So I think that's a big aspect, as you rightly said, things which are not possible to kind of even imagine that you could centralize, you can centralize. But again, I think in terms of the evolutionary trend, really, what we see is, that this continues, this kind of whole scale of tax COEs continue to kind of work through. Today, we're seeing 35% of, GCCs have or more have tax COEs, and that trend continues to move forward. And not only are they kind of centralizing these operations, but they're creating real hubs around it, with the GCC really becoming the central hub for everything, right, across the organization. And I think that's where the future evolves, like with data lakes being created, kind of leveraging that data to kind of really step change in terms of how the future kind of evolves for the organization. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing, and more and more complex processes getting kind of really automated within the GCC.
All right, so Vishal, technology playing a very, very important role here. Let me speak to Rajesh on this. Rajesh, from your experience at Accenture India, what do you think are the key drivers when it comes to centralizing these key knowledge-based processes in these GCCs?
What is important is to understand that these key knowledge-based processes, where are they coming from? And, how have we automated some of it already and where we want to go? So when you look at, if I have to put it in context of supply chain, right, when we see there's, in supply chain context, when we say we are now architecting it for future. So when you look at it from a business perspective, there is now the new unified supply chain that we're talking about, where you are doing some kind of a combination of intelligent supply chain. You're talking about the digital twin that is there. So total knowledge-based processes here now we are talking about is bringing in the technology angle, in terms of how it is easily accessible to everybody, and then everybody has access to all respective data that they need to look at it.
Right. So those are the aspects very, very important. But Arvind, coming to you at Philips, you have a lot of experience already in centralizing some of these processes. Give us first-hand experience in how did you manage that, and what were the key aspects to look at when you were, embarking on this process?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the key considerations, right, I mean, it comes down to really look at quality. How can you deliver high quality, faster or on time at the lowest cost, right, on the efficiency? I think these are basically the key considerations. I think when we talk about statutory reporting, which we recently centralized in our GCC, I think our ability to standardize in a central environment, drive automation and leverage capability, and more importantly, sustain knowledge. And specifically, productivity is less of a concern here. But typically, when you centralize, you have the labor arbitrage, and when you drive automation, speed, you, more importantly, in these kind of spaces, you reduce your dependencies on third-party service providers in the markets, which basically kicks in as a primary driver for efficiencies.
We'll talk more about that on the other side of the show. We'll take a quick break. We are discussing the global capability centers and how they're aspiring to become more prominent in India. Stay tuned.
CNBC TV 18 and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers. CNBC TV 18 and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers.
Welcome back. You're watching CNBC TV 18 and Thomson Reuters presents the future of global capability centers. Gaurav, help us understand from Deloitte's own experience in terms of how central processes and centralization of these GCCs are beneficial for the companies, especially in tax, trade, and some of these very, very intricate and technical subjects?
When we go out to clients and say that, this is something that you should do, or, this is something that has a business case, we actually have implemented that in our own environment as well. And, being a distributed organization that we are with presence in so many countries, there was a fair amount of, I would say, differences that were there in terms of how we operated, and especially if you look at the tax environment, part of it was also because of the local regulatory requirements, but some of them were just in terms of different ways of working. So in our own shared services and also in our center, which we use to deliver work for our global clients, we try to standardize that to a lot of extent, right? And one is obviously like Arvind was referring to in terms of just making it more repeatable, making it more consistent, and starting to see what kind of efficiencies can come in. But the second was also then starting to see what are the kind of best practices that are there that we can apply across, right? And that was true both for our internal environment as well as for the work that we're doing for clients. So I think a part of it is just bringing it together and trying to see, am I delivering it in the right way? How can I make it more consistent, repeatable? How can I apply the best practices? And where all then can I start to add value in terms of automation, etc. And that's been the same journey that we've gone through as well.
And Rajesh, you spotted this particular aspect on the talent, the right capabilities. Apart from human resources aspect, what is the strategy in terms of retention, and does technology play a critical role in that as well, since it's the cornerstone of really the success of a GCC, and especially when we talk about the Indian context?
Talent today is the key, and the talent, how are you retaining it? How are you bringing that they are with the organization? So for example, today one of the biggest challenge that we see, this great resignation, is how are you really taking care of this new generation which is coming in at the time when it was pandemic has hit us, and how are you going to retain them? So if you go back 10 years ago, it was a different need where the cost arbitrage was one of the key criteria of setting up GCCs. But now when we look at it in current context, GCCs are that cost is something still as an element, but not the core element. The core element has become, whether it is compressed transformation of the organization or the organization which is trying to set up their capability center, competency center, or even shared services when we talked about, or earlier we were talking about this processes. That also now it is no more the support function. It is the core function that is being handled from the GCCs in India. So in that context, what is happening is people need to be more technical than just to know a particular function or particular process or particular part of the process. So you need to get end-to-end view, and that is the core of holding the people. So you need to make the new set of people, or even the people who were there earlier, now they need to become techies. So if you have to call them, they have to become techies. They need to understand the whole digital aspect of business, whether it is related to whichever type of industry. So they need to get that view, and that needs to be presented to them, as well as for the new one which is already, let's say, in their education, in their engineering or whatever education background they come from. They are already being fed with this in the initial phases of their career. But what is important is now make them industrialize in context of where they are getting deployed. The need of the people have changed significantly over the last 2-3 years, and especially with the new generation where it is no more that the job is the need, but they are looking at something creating new. So they want to be the creator, they want to also be part of the core. So today GCCs have changed themselves automatically in that context, because the GCCs are being set that way, and people are also being trained, or people are being deployed to be on the core of this business.
But Vishal, how do companies really solve for the bottlenecks on the journey for centralization of these processes, and how do they become future ready?
In the past, the issues and the roadblocks were always around people and technology, right? So think about people first. As Rajesh said, everyone, I think techies, everyone wants to be kind of tech oriented now. No one, 10, 15 years ago when I was a chartered accountant, it was to be all about, reconciliations and tick marks and so on. No one wants to do that, right? I think there's very irrespective of how your pay and how the compensation is structured, I think there's a little bit of a much bigger kind of aspect of how you enjoy your work. And I think that is the aspect where, future-proofing your functions is also about future-proofing your talent and ensuring that your talent is kind of more and more attuned to kind of what you're providing in terms of a work environment, right? In that aspect, right, if I think about Thomson Reuters, we kind of put the term taxologist, which is a tax technologist, several years ago, right? And I think that's how we see the future. Supply chain guys, trade compliance guys don't want to talk about how we're going to kind of fill this form up. It's about how we're going to make sure that we optimize the supply chain. How do we make sure that we kind of get benefits of free trade agreements and leverage them to the max? How are we kind of thinking about more adding value to the company and serving the bigger purpose? And I think that's where the talent piece and future proofing comes in. And when it comes to technology, in the past, you used to invest in huge technologies like huge server farms, huge kind of, big perpetual licenses. All that's going away with things being on the cloud, things being more SaaS models, software as a service, as opposed to kind of, big upfront licenses. And that actually helps you future-proof, especially when it comes to these complex functions, right? Because then you have the content, which is something where, like, if you think about a technology solution for, say, tax, we have regulations which are managed by roughly 2,000 odd CPAs across 200 countries, and we use that scale to give that benefit of scale to kind of our end customer, with thousands of them, right? And no one organization operating on 50 countries will have to spend a significant amount of effort and resources to be able to do that. So I think some of those future-proofing and technology aspects also come into play.
But Arvind, highlight more of these common bottlenecks that are seen in the transformation journey of the GCCs, and how do you think, in your experience, that can be overcome?
Yeah, I think many of these aspects were already referred, right? I think it all starts with the proper fit gap analysis, because every country, every market that you have is very unique. So I think doing a proper fit gap analysis probably is of prime importance. And I think the second, third, and fourth priority is all about people and how you train them and how you provide them the knowledge transfers, etc. And we see that quite often, that any amount of business knowledge, business process knowledge, not just what the person is going to be doing, but how he's influencing the other streams, what kind of upstream process is feeding the content to that person, is going to be very crucial. So understanding the end-to-end process along with the system knowledge becoming extremely crucial, because with more standardization and automation, the person needs to know exactly how he can influence upstream process owners who are in the markets and generally the senior stakeholders on how to behave in the right way and really get the content first time right. And this really puts a very different elements into the knowledge transfer. It's not just the process and system knowledge, but also the behavioral aspects which needs to come in, where the influencing skills and those kind of softer skills becomes of quite important. So I think it's all about getting the right capabilities, getting them trained not just in their core functions, but in the systems, and also the end-to-end process becomes extremely crucial in becoming a successful GCC.
But Vishal, final word to you on how to overcome some of these critical challenges that are commonly faced by the GCC leaders, and how does technology play a big role in that?
Technology definitely plays a huge role, and we've kind of talked through that in terms of how technology is really enabling things to be automated, which were, in the prior kind of era, almost thought to be impossible to automate. But what you heard across the discussion so far, right, is technology along with the right talent is the combination which you kind of really have to build as kind of the foundation for a transformation of this nature. And some of the things which I'd say GCC leaders I've spoken to who've really kind of thought about the future and really kind of been kind of the torch bearers in the industry, similar to what kind of in some ways what Arvind kind of talked through, is kind of challenging that status quo. It's constantly kind of not taking no for an answer in terms of what you cannot kind of centralize, cannot kind of optimize, and working on a phased plan with the right kind of talent and technology. So that you can influence the right stakeholders and work on a plan which is kind of a long-term plan to convert what we used to call before, in the past as the back office, which is what kind of GCCs kind of started with, to kind of being really the backbone and kind of having a seat at the table for the decision making, as opposed to kind of just taking kind of orders in, right? And I think that entire ecosystem is something which has to be developed and kind of has to have a vision for us to kind of see what we should really optimize, GCCs in the future.
All right, well said there, Vishal. The two T's, very important coming out in this whole discussion. Talent as well as technology, very critical for the success of these GCCs. Thanks to all of you, Vishal, Gaurav, Arvind, Rajesh, for joining us with your insights. With that, it's a wrap on this show. Thank you so much to our viewers for tuning in.
CNBC TV 18 and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers.